Welcome to Movie Slice. Quick, fun recaps of your favorite movies. Sharp, funny, and to the point. Hit subscribe and get your perfect slice of cinema. The story begins with a little girl dancing with her father, whose name is Meckrol. We learn that the girl's name is Eve, and unfortunately, her mother and older sister died some time ago because of Meckrol's work. Despite this, Eve was living happily and peacefully with her father. We also see that Eve is attached to a ballerina toy and loves it very much because her father was the one who gave it to her. But unfortunately, one day, a group from the cult gang appears and attacks Mackrol's house. At that moment, a huge battle breaks out between the gang members and Mackrol. Of course, during this battle, Mackrol's only goal was to protect his daughter and keep her safe from the gang members. But unfortunately, after a fierce fight, the cult gang members managed to shoot Mackrol and tie him up. Then, the gang leader, called the counselor, enters. The first thing the counselor does is ask Mackrol about the whereabouts of his daughter Eve, telling him he must hand her over so she can be raised in their family. Mackrol tells the counselor that this is impossible and says he doesn't want her to live among a gang. He wants Eve to live a normal life like any other girl. Of course, Eve saw everything happening while she was hiding, but unfortunately, the counselor gave Mackrol a choice. Either he dies alone, or both he and his daughter die. The counselor put a bullet in the gun and told Mackrol to choose. At that moment, Mackrol decided to sacrifice himself, but at the last moment, Eve called out to him to stop him. As soon as the gang members saw her, another fight broke out between Mackrol and them. In the middle of the battle, Mackrol was seriously injured and one of the gang members was about to finish him off. But at the last moment, Eve grabbed the gun and saved her father. Afterward, Eve saw a tattoo on the hands of all the gang members, but she didn't get a chance to ask her father about it because he quickly took her and they started to escape before the gang could finish them off. While escaping, Mackrol planted explosives all over the house, and when they got out, he detonated them and destroyed the entire house. When the counselor saw what happened, he was convinced that they were all dead, so he left the scene. Unfortunately, at that time, Mackrol couldn't survive his many injuries and died in front of Eve. Of course, Eve was shocked and couldn't believe it. After a while, Eve reached the police station where a man named Winston came to her. We learn that this man is the manager of the Continental Hotel in New York. Winston told Eve that she now has no one left, and the gang that killed her father would surely come looking for her again. He told her the best thing now is to go with him, and he would take her to a place where she would be raised and well cared for. Since Eve had no other choice, she decided to go with Winston and listen to him. They went to a gang called Ruska Roma, and Winston asked them to raise Eve and consider her one of their own. The gang leader sat with Eve, and when she saw the look of challenge and revenge in her eyes, she decided to accept her into Ruska Roma. Before Winston left, he said goodbye to Eve and told her if she ever needed anything, not to hesitate to come to him. He also gave her a gold coin, the currency used by all the gangsters in New York. Eve thanked Winston and said goodbye. From that moment, Eve began her story with the Ruska Roma gang. After 12 years, Eve grows up to be a strong young woman. She spent all her time training in ballet, fighting, and shooting. Sometimes she would train on ballet until her feet bled. The pain didn't matter to Eve at all because she wanted to achieve her goal no matter the difficulties. She always trained with the boys because they were stronger, but she always felt weak because she kept losing to them. She tried every way to beat them, but still couldn't. One day, her coach gave her advice that changed her life. Not to rely only on strength, but to always focus on her opponent's weak points and her own strengths and fight as a girl. From this time, Eve changed completely as she became the strongest one in the gang and no one can challenge her. Even in target protection training, Eve always excelled and used the gun amazingly. One day, Eve saw John Wick, the most dangerous gangster in New York, known as the Boogeyman. Eve immediately went to him and asked how she could be like him and start real missions. John answered, "Just by asking this question, you're already on the right path." 2 months later, Eve got her first mission, to protect the daughter of a businessman targeted by a gang. The only condition was that Eve use rubber bullets and not kill anyone. The next day, Eve started her mission. At first, everything was calm, but soon the gang appeared, went to the girl, and grabbed her. Eve immediately went down to help and tried to keep them away from the girl. The gang members warned Eve to stay out of their way, but she didn't listen, and a fight broke out. The battle was very tough for Eve because it was her first mission, and she was only allowed to use rubber bullets and not kill anyone. Despite all this, Eve managed to defeat all the gang members and protect the businessman's daughter. Thus, Eve's first real mission was a success, and after that, all her missions succeeded, and her name started to become known among the gangsters. One day, Eve was on a mission as usual. When she finished and got into her car, another car crashed into hers, and they started fighting. In the end, Eve managed to take out all the men in the other car. Before she left, Eve noticed a tattoo on the gang member's hands, the same tattoo she saw on the hands of the gang that killed her father. At that moment, Eve remembered everything and decided to track down this gang to avenge her family. Afterward, Eve went to the leader of Ruska Roma and asked her about the tattoo and the gang leaders. The Ruska Roma leader told Eve to stay away from this matter and not search for that gang, for her own good and for the good of Ruska Roma. Eve agreed and left, but Eve wouldn't give up her rights. The next day, Eve went to the Continental Hotel and met the manager, Winston. Winston was happy to see her grown up and strong. After greeting him, Eve asked about the tattoo and the gang she was searching for. Winston told her it was best not to look for them because they are a very big and dangerous gang. At that moment, Eve used the gold coin Winston had given her when she was a child. She asked Winston to get it back for her one more time and to tell her information about this gang, so Winston helped her. He had no other choice and decided to help Eve and told her all the information he knew. He told her that this gang was not just an ordinary gang, but rather families and entire countries. Eve didn't care about any of that and asked Winston about their location. Winston told her that no one knew their exact location, but that one of the gang members was staying at the Continental Hotel in Prague and that his name was Daniel. He said that if Eve went to him, she would definitely be able to get the information she wanted. So Eve quickly headed to Prague, entered the Continental Hotel, and even booked a room next to Daniel's. But strangely, there were many gangs there at the time, all waiting for the right moment to kill Daniel. Of course, the first thing Eve did when she entered the room was sneak out onto the balcony and into Daniel's room. To her surprise, she found a girl there named Ella, who turned out to be Daniel's daughter. She also learned from Daniel that the Colt gang had issued orders to kill him because he refused to hand over his daughter to them. At that moment, Eve remembered everything that had happened to her as a child. Since Ella's story was exactly like hers when her father refused to hand her over to the Colt gang. Eve then asked Daniel about his gang and requested that he tell her their location. At the same time, she tried to help him and keep the gang members away from Ella. But after many chases, unfortunately, Daniel was seriously injured and Eve was also attacked. Someone hit her on the head and she lost consciousness. At that point, Ella was taken by the Colt gang, led by a woman named Lena. When Eve woke up, she found herself in front of the Continental Hotel guards, along with a few members of another gang. She immediately told them she hadn't broken any rules or killed anyone inside the Continental Hotel. That's when we learned that there are rules inside the Continental Hotel, and no one is allowed to kill inside. The head guard told Eve he knew everything and ordered his men to kill the gang members who were with Eve because they had broken the rules, but Eve hadn't. After Eve left the hotel, she went to a weapon shop owned by a man named Frank. She asked Frank for help and used a gold coin so that Frank would tell her the location of Colt's gang. At first, Frank claimed he didn't know anything about them, but at that moment, the gang arrived at Frank's shop and a new fight started between them, Frank and Eve. After the shop was wrecked, Eve managed to defeat them all and also saved Frank. Frank decided to return the favor and told Eve that the gang she was looking for was in Austria, in a city called Hallstatt behind the Shake Mountains. Eve thanked him and began her final journey to avenge her family. On the way, the leader of the Ruska Roma gang called her and told her to stop what she was doing and not to continue, but Eve refused and told the leader she wouldn't stop until she finished her mission, which she was trained for. Soon after, Eve reached Hallstatt, but the city looked strange and its people even stranger. When Eve arrived, she went into a restaurant to start looking for the gang. At that moment, another car stopped in front of the restaurant, and the man who got out immediately attacked Eve. After a tough fight, Eve managed to defeat him and went to hide on the second floor of the restaurant. But to her surprise, the restaurant's chef also attacked her, and it was clear from her moves that she was well trained. We noticed that all the townspeople are well trained and armed, and as soon as they learned there was an intruder in their city, they all headed to the restaurant to try to catch Eve. But Eve, being strong, managed to take down many of them. Unfortunately, after several chases, the gang's numbers increased. Eve's strength was depleted, and they managed to capture her easily. When Lena, the bodyguard of the counselor, arrived, she saw the Ruska Roma gang's symbol tattooed on Eve's back, so she ordered her men to tie up Eve and take her to the counselor to decide what to do with her. When the counselor met Eve, he asked who she worked for and why she was doing all this. Eve told him that the Ruska Roma gang had nothing to do with her actions and that she was avenging her family. The counselor was surprised and asked Eve who her family was that she would do all this for them. Eve told him, "You and your men once came to our house, killed my father, Macrol, and wanted to take me." At that moment, the counselor remembered everything and told his men not to harm Eve, then left the room. Lena went to the counselor and asked him why he spared her. The counselor shocked her by saying that Eve was her sister, and he didn't know she was alive because when he blew up the house, he thought she and her father had died. At that moment, they heard a noise in Eve's room. When they went to check, they found that Eve had killed the guards and was trying to escape. Lena helped Eve do so and ran after her to explain the truth and tell her she was her sister. After a while, Lena managed to catch up with Eve and they started talking. Lena told her that they all thought she was dead and no one ever knew she was still alive. Eve started blaming Lena and asked her why she was living with the man who killed their father. Lena told her that the counselor was a good man and that their father had broken the rules and had to be held accountable for what he did. While they were talking, the counselor men surrounded the house they were in and they were ordered to blow it up with Lena and Eve inside. The guards were surprised as the counselor was sacrificing Lena, but since those were the orders, they carried them out, threw grenades into the house, and blew it up. Unfortunately, Lena died in the explosion, which only increased Eve's desire for revenge. She decided she would not leave until she avenged all her family from the counselor who killed them. Before the counselor's men could storm the house, Eve escaped and hid, waiting for the right moment to reappear and finish what she started. When the counselor received the latest news, he became even more afraid and realized that Eve was truly strong and would not stop until she reached him and finished him off. Because the counselor was afraid, he called the leader of the Ruska Roma gang and asked her to stop what was happening, or else he would destroy their entire gang. The Ruska Roma leader told the counselor that she had nothing to do with Eve and that Eve was acting on her own for revenge and not following any orders from her. The counselor didn't like what the leader said and warned her that she was responsible for what was happening and had to end it all before midnight. The leader told the counselor not to worry and assured him that she would send someone who would end all of this and also finish off Eve. And indeed, after a few hours, John Wick arrived in the city, and of course, John easily managed to reach the hiding place where Eve was. When Eve saw John, she asked him, "You came to kill me, right?" John replied, "The choice is yours. Either you leave or you die." At that moment, Eve decided to die rather than run away and leave her rights behind. In that moment, a battle began between John and Eve, and it was clear the fight was completely unbalanced because John was much stronger than her. When Eve realized she couldn't do anything against John, she asked him to help her and let her take revenge for her family. At that moment, John sympathized with her and told Eve she had exactly half an hour. If she couldn't finish the mission and take revenge on the counselor, he would appear again and finish her off. Eve thanked John, and her last half hour began. The first thing Eve did was go to the gang's weapons store and take the most powerful weapon there, which was fire. Then she went out into the city streets and started burning all the counselor's men. Her goal was to reach him. When the counselor found out what was happening, he decided to take Ella and escape, leaving his men and the rest of the gang to deal with Eve. On the other hand, Eve had taken down most of the gang's men, but there was one left, the strongest man in the city, as he was the counselor's personal bodyguard. after a battle between Eve and the bodyguard. Unfortunately, the bodyguard managed to injure her and pointed his weapon at her, about to kill her. But at the last moment, John Wick returned and finished off the bodyguard. Eve quickly got up and ran to catch the counselor before he escaped the city. Indeed, Eve stood in front of the counselor's car and kept attacking it until she managed to kill the driver and stop the car. At that moment, the counselor got out and tried to talk to Eve. He told her that everything she was doing was pointless because his gang was very big, and when she killed him, someone else would take his place, and they wouldn't leave her alone. They would take revenge on her. Before the counselor could finish his words, Eve finished him off and also took Ella from the car. All of this was being watched by John from a distance, but he did nothing since Eve had completed her mission within the half hour he had given her. Finally, Eve avenged her family and did what she wanted. When things calmed down, Eve took Ella and returned her to her father Daniel in New York. Every night, Eve would go watch the circus performances put on by the girls she grew up with when she was young. But unfortunately, one day, one of the leaders of the cult gang contacted the gang network and put a $5 million bounty on Eve McCroll's head. The message reached all the gangs, and now Eve was living in danger because all the gangs in New York wanted to get rid of her to claim the reward. When Eve received the message, she quickly escaped from the theater, and so Eve's new story was about to begin. If you liked it, don't forget to subscribe.